Mr Acting Speaker, I'm delighted to rise this afternoon, or as this clock ticks over, to speak on the Appropriation Parliament Bill and Appropriation Bill 2018. Of course, I speak in the context of this being the first Labor budget under this re-elected Palaszczuk Labor government. I've got to remind honourable members and people watching this broadcast, wherever they are in the great state of Queensland, particularly in the great electorate of Whitsunday, that from my recollection, I think this is the 17th budget out of the last 20. So when we talk about cost of living pressures on families, farmers, retirees, pensioners, battlers, Labor's got big ownership of that, Mr Deputy Speaker, big ownership. And I heard the contribution by my fellow North Queenslander, the Labor member for Mundingburra, and talking about concessions. Well, concessions have been going on for a long time, but the concessions aren't enough for a lot of people in our community, and there are a lot of people out there more than ever doing it tough. The cost of power is out of control. Cost of power is out of control, and there's been a lot said. And before I get into the guts of the budget, Mr Deputy Speaker, or the essence of the budget, I beg your pardon, can I just say I want to reiterate my support for the coal industry in central and north Queensland. And I hear the interjection. I appreciate the support on this side of the chamber. It goes without saying, Mr Deputy Speaker, because I'm happy to drop the C word in here, because coal is king. Coal is king, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm proud of my sister working in the coal industry, my brother-in-law, my cousins, relatives, friends, even a few foe. It's a great industry and it's a great contributor to the Queensland economy. And on World Environment Day, Mr Deputy Speaker, it dawned on me, not for the first time, but I went over to Langford Island, which has been rebuilt basically thanks to the great work of the National Parks and Wildlife Service, who've done a terrific job there post-Cyclone Debbie, unlike the Red Army. And I'll come to that particularly in a moment. But I looked across the horizon, I saw this bulk carrier coming down the coast of the Whitsundays, and you could see people, 3 tourists there on the spit at Langford Island, enjoying the Great Barrier Reef, the Whitsunday Islands. And it's been going on for decades. The coal and the tourism industry, the tourism and the resources sector, working together, getting on together. And of course the world-class pilotage service that's provided by our pilots through Hydrographer's Passage and other places through the Great Barrier Reef is world-class, and we commend all those professionals in that regard. But in relation to power, Mr Deputy Speaker, let's not forget that we've seen this cash cow continue under successive Labor governments. I'm not talking about the cash cow on breakfast television. I'm talking about the cash cow that comes from that side. I see the members of the government laughing, but the people of Queensland, the people of my electorate, Mr Deputy Speaker, they're not laughing, they're hurting. And let's have a look at the money, that cash cow. The cash cow, imagine winning this on breakfast television. The generator's making $1.24 billion instead of the $482 million they were budgeted to make. Well, the question must be asked, where did the money go? Where did the money go? Well, I'll tell you what, that's the question that people across my electorate want to know. The farmer from Foxdale, the retiree from Rural View, the pensioner from Proserpine, the battler from Bucosia, they're all queuing up, Mr Deputy Speaker. They want to know what happened to it. What happened to it? I've got to make the point, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's 15 months, nearly 15 months since Tropical Cyclone Debbie. And of course we saw the Red Army with their red tanks, maybe red submarines. I didn't see any, but I'm sure they were out there. They rolled into my electorate last month, and a lot of people wondering what is going on, what is happening here. Are they going to help our community? Because we were hurting after Cyclone Debbie, and last year's budget was a massive letdown. I don't think this one is any different. There is some support for the Whitsundays. So, you know, and I know it's not the trend of modern politics, but there are some things in the budget here. Here it is, Mr Deputy Speaker. There it is, the glossy budget regional action plan.
Are you seeking to table that, member?
No need to, Mr Deputy Speaker. Thank you for the question, though.
Then either put it down, read off it, or table it.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, for your guidance. I want to say that in the regional action plan, there's 29 items in there, 29 items, policy initiatives, projects. There's just six in my electorate exclusively of Whitsunday. Just 6. And for example, the Proserpine State High School, going into the last state election, there was $10 million promised by the Labor candidate for the Proserpine State High School. Well, it's amazing because in this regional action plan, this glossy brochure, no problem with the glossy brochure, but it's the content, there's only $1.1 million in 2018-19 for the Proserpine State High School. And there's a missing $4.2 million, because when you look at the total spend, what happened to it? What happened to it? And people want to know what happened to it. People are involved with the P&C at Proserpine, people in our local community, people in Airlie Beach, because they're wondering when will the Palaszczuk Labor government do some planning for a new Peter 12 school at Cannon Valley. Councillor Ron Pedersen's banged on about it. I've raised the issue. Local people down there with kids. There's so many students get bussed into Proserpine every day. Where's the planning? Under the former LNP government, and I see the member for Surfers Paradise in the chamber here, we had a schools planning commission. Things actually happened. We actually built the Northern Beaches State High School in the northern beaches of Mackay, those wonderful seaside suburbs, Bucasia, Omeo, Shoal Point, Dolphin Heads. It is a great part of the world. I take the interjection from the member for Mermaid Beach, because that school, Mr Deputy Speaker, it was promised by, well, I think it was 2000, it was supposed to be up and running by 2002 from memory, and they went through election after election after election. And the Labor propaganda machine, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's world class, world class. Fools a lot of people over many years, but the people of Whitsunday weren't fooled in 2012, because, you know what, I still remember after Labor shut down schools in my electorate, people saying to me they voted Labor all their life, and they said, if you're going to build this Costo, we're with you. And that school was built, funded and opened. John Paul Angbrook, the then Minister for Education, was there. It was a great day. When I first burst on the scene, Mr Deputy Speaker, just guinea grass. Just guinea grass. We can't even get guinea grass in Cannon Valley, near Airlie Beach, to cater for the increasing population there. So there's no money in this budget for new schools. We talk about the importance of educating our future Queenslanders. Well, where is that funding? Where is that funding? And it's in the context I make this contribution, Mr Deputy Speaker, because under various Labor governments over the last 20 years in my electorate, we've seen the closure of country schools at Napi, Yalbaroo, Mount Charlton. We saw recently the Palaszczuk Labor government, before the last election, kill off the kindergarten at Seaforth. That was a kick in the guts for people at Seaforth, Halliday Bay, Ball Bay, Cape Hillsborough, Mount Jukes. A lot of mums were dislocated, a lot of dads were dislocated, with their kids having to move schools because they didn't have the kindergarten option on site at the Seaforth State School. Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to say that when it comes to cyclone recovery, we've seen, amazingly, the Premier on her feet yesterday morning in this place, yesterday morning, and it's the talk of the town in Proserpine, because lo and behold, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, and for some it might be a cure for insomnia, but my newsletter, the Costigan Report, last week said, I wonder if we're going to get some money from the Palaszczuk Labor government to help the council reopen the Proserpine Entertainment Centre, damaged by Cyclone Debbie 15 months ago almost. And amazingly, it's not in the glossy brochure that I haven't tabled here today, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's not mentioned there. Can't see it in the Queensland Reconstruction Authority budget papers. There's stuff about the Airlie Beach foreshore, the Blue Water Trail in Mackay, and incredibly Queen's Park, which I'll come to in a moment, but nothing for the Proserpine Entertainment Centre. And amazingly, after Jackie Trad delivers her first Labor budget, the Premier rises in here and says, abracadabra, $500,000. I'm delighted. I'm tickled pink. I'm delighted. And it came after lobbying from me and others in the community to help the council, to reopen that facility.
It wouldn't have happened if you weren't the member.
I'll take the interjection from the member for Southern Downs. We get up there and we fire a shot. Some people don't like it, but I'll call it as I see it.
Pause the clock. Member for Southern Downs, if you want to interject, please be in your own seat. Thank you. Member has the call.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, we did see, as I mentioned, the Red Army roll into town a few weeks ago. In this budget, a massive letdown, because tourism, of course, is the lifeblood of Airlie Beach, the heart of the reef. Great place, Airlie Beach. And I just wonder, what about the drive market? It's so important to tourism. We come up the battered and bruised, Bruce as I call it, across the flood-prone Gorganga Plains, which this government is clearly not interested in partnering with the Commonwealth. And don't worry about that. I'll put the asset on Michael McCormack, the Deputy Prime Minister. I've known him for a long time, but it takes two to tango, and a lot of people in my electorate, no matter who they vote for, want to see the state and the feds working together, right? There's no need for me to put on a leotard to put on a song and dance about it. Might get a few people excited, Mr Deputy Speaker, but In all seriousness, we need to get Gorganga Plains happening. But in this budget, there is no funding, none at all, for a new visitor information centre for Proserpine. Nothing. Nothing at all. And it pains me. I don't begrudge Serena getting one, which is about to be officially open, but there's one happening on the Bruce Highway at Serena, 2 hours away, yet for the drive market coming into the Whitsundays, I see the member for Cairns nodding. It wouldn't happen on his watch in his electorate or in his region. TTNQ, they'd be blowing up the Lux. They'd be blowing up the Lux. And I tell you what, there's people who are passionate about tourism in my part of the world, they are blowing up the Lux. There's no money in this budget for the RV park in Proserpine that's been championed by the Proserpine Chamber of Commerce. I caught up recently with President Bob Bogey and Secretary Karen Vladimans, supporting their interests, supporting their bid in the $10 million export hub for the Whitsundays for Proserpine. They grow the tucker up the road in Bowen. They can grow it, we can ship it. This budget was a big, big letdown. I want to talk about health, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I see there's $441.7 million in health funding for the Region Hospital and Health Service. But I want to pay tribute to Danielle McAlpine because a $1.5 million funding announcement pre-budget was made by the Health Minister, which I'm sure wouldn't have happened only for that lady getting up in the community, going public about her having to wait, get this, well over 500 days to see a specialist. 500 plus days, well documented in the Whitsunday Times, and then the Minister announced that funding before the budget. And again in the budget there's no funding at all. Well, the Minister, I think, the Minister,
if you want to interject, you need to be in your seat. Were you reflecting on my handling of the House there, Member for Whitsunday?
Not at all, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Well, then continue your contribution.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. So there's no funding in the budget for additional ambulance services on Hamilton Island. We've only got one paramedic there. It's not his fault, but it's like banking hours. Big island population, you know, they wouldn't tolerate it on Fraser Island, Magnetic Island, Hammond Island, Thursday Island. But you know what? We have to cop a suite on Hamilton Island, and it's wrong. Glenn Burke, the Chief Executive Officer, has contacted the government. He's said a number of things about it. I've raised it publicly as well. There's no funding in the budget for that whatsoever. Mr Deputy Speaker, I did mention Queen's Park. No wonder Greg Williamson's doing cartwheels in Mackay all the way from Burns Pie Factory all the way to the rotunda at Queen's Park. I don't remember it being damaged by Cyclone Debbie. I'm pleased for the Mayor of the city that I represent in getting funding from the government, but incredibly, Queen's Park, I was there last year, I think it was, Mr Deputy Speaker, with the then editor of the Daily Mercury, the then deputy editor of the Daily Mercury. Guess what? We didn't see any damage. There might have been a hibiscus knocked out, but they got the money to fix it. And in Proserpine, we've got the show coming up next Friday. Well, some of these clowns, Mr Deputy Speaker, they'd fit in real good. They'd fit in real good because we didn't get any money in this budget to rebuild the old pavilion at the Proserpine Showgrounds. There's a floor, the walls have come down, it's like Berlin. There's no roof. And amazingly, again in this budget, the regional snapshot, you can see that Labor's basically loading up the munitions factory, ready to wage war on my colleague, the member for Burdekin. There's $1 million in the budget for the Claremont Showgrounds and Sale Yards. We didn't get 1 red cent. 1 red cent. I don't begrudge the good people of Claremont, the people who are passionate about the cattle industry in our hinterland, because it's important to them, but we didn't get anything. In fact, in the 25-minute contribution by the Treasurer, did she mention the word agriculture? How do you spell it? What a challenge it is, and that's the sort of insult it is for people in regional rural Queensland following the vegetation management laws introduced to Queensland, which farmers and graziers need like a hole in the head. What's in this budget for farmers, cane farmers from Coningsby through to Coolachoo? A big, fat zero. A big, fat zero, Mr Deputy Speaker. I've got to say that, look, I'm very passionate about the Great Barrier Reef. As I said, I was there on World Environment Day on Langford Island, seeing the work that can be done with our national parks if they're resourced properly. But I've got to say, $5 million for eco-lodge accommodation on Whitehaven Beach or adjacent to it, there's a lot of question marks about that. We should be using that funding to build a visitor information centre in Proserpine to drive the tourism industry, particularly the drive market. So much more could be done. We've been let down. There's no doubt about that in this particular state budget. Mr Deputy Speaker, I've got to say that the agricultural sector feels let down. The tourism industry feels let down. I think our chambers of commerce in Mackay, Proserpine, in Airlie Beach, they feel let down by just another Labor budget. So typical of Labor.